All right, so we've got a movie so notorious they had to re-edit it.
Twice.
That's right.
Yeah.
Caligula, the ultimate cut.
Wow.
That's what we're diving into today. And
that's a deep cut.
it is a deep cut. It's a reimagining of the 1979 film.
Yeah.
And let's just say the original
Oh, okay.
had a reputation.
It did.
What we're trying to figure out is, can you really reclaim art from a film like this?
Right.
And is this ultimate cut worth a watch?
Well, you're right. The original film definitely pushed boundaries,
Mhm.
and not always in a good way.
Right.
This new cut is interesting because it tries to separate the art from, let's call it, the excess baggage.
Okay.
It goes back to the director's original vision, focusing on the story and performances.
So they're trying to salvage a masterpiece from a train wreck.
That's a tall order.
That's a tall order. How do they even go about doing that?
It's fascinating. They really went in deep. They
Right.
removed a lot of the graphic content added by the producer,
Okay.
which many felt was gratuitous and exploitative.
Right.
They've also restored some of the original dialogue and restructured certain scenes to emphasize the psychological and political aspects of the story.
So it's not just about cutting out the racy stuff. It's about reframing the entire narrative.
Precisely.
Okay.
Think of it like an archaeological dig.
Okay.
They're carefully brushing away the dirt and debris to reveal the original artifact underneath.
Right.
But here's the catch. Even with all these changes, they're still dealing with a story about Caligula,
Yeah.
a Roman emperor infamous for his cruelty and depravity.
Okay, so how do you balance a serious exploration of power and tyranny with, well, the remnants of a film that was originally pushing the boundaries of what was acceptable?
Yeah.
I mean, exploitation cinema is a pretty loaded term.
You're hitting on a key point.
Yeah.
Exploitation cinema often relies on sensationalism,
Right.
violence, and, well, let's just say it, often sexual exploitation
Yeah.
for its shock value.
Right.
So the challenge for the ultimate cut is to transcend those elements and offer a more nuanced perspective.
It's almost like they're trying to create a whole new genre,
Right.
a historical drama intertwined with, I don't even know what to call it.
It's definitely a unique hybrid, and that's what makes it so intriguing.
Yeah.
And, one of the things that's often overlooked in discussions about exploitation cinema is the potential for powerful performances.
Speaking of which, the review we have highlights Malcolm McDowell's performance as Caligula.
Yeah.
They say he's absolutely captivating.
And rightfully so.
Yeah.
He manages to convey both the charisma and the chilling ruthlessness of the character.
Wow.
The review even draws a parallel to his role in A Clockwork Orange,
Uh-huh.
another film that explores the dark side of human nature.
Interesting.
You see the comparison there?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Both characters are charismatic, but deeply disturbing.
Right.
You kind of find yourself rooting for them, even though, they're doing terrible things.
Yeah.
That's a testament to McDowell's talent, for sure.
Absolutely.
But if they're trying to reframe the film, how do they handle McDowell's performance?
Right.
They can't exactly edit out the main character.
They actually use it to their advantage. They've
Okay.
restored some of Caligula's monologues, allowing McDowell to really delve into the character's psyche.
Okay.
You get a sense of his intelligence, his ambition, and ultimately his descent into madness.
So instead of shining away from the darkness, they're leaning into it,
Right.
but in a more controlled, almost Shakespearean way.
Exactly.
Right.
They're using those intense moments to explore deeper themes like the corrupting nature of absolute power.
Uh-huh.
It's no longer just shock value. It's a study of how power can warp even the most brilliant minds.
Now that's interesting.
Yeah,
But doesn't that also run the risk of making Caligula a sympathetic figure?
that's the tightrope they're walking.
Okay.
They want to present him as a complex character, someone capable of both great charm and unspeakable cruelty.
Right.
It's up to the viewer to decide how they ultimately interpret his actions.
Uh-huh.
But it definitely makes you think about the nature of leadership, the allure of power, and how easily it can be abused.
It seems like this ultimate cut is asking a lot from the audience.
Yeah.
We have to be aware of the original film's context, the exploitation elements, and now we're being asked to engage with these really complex themes of power and morality.
Yeah.
I'm not sure everyone's going to be up for that.
You make a valid point.
Yeah.
It's not a passive viewing experience.
Right.
You have to actively engage with the material and grapple with some difficult questions.
And speaking of difficult questions, the review mentions a rather infamous orgy scene.
Oh, yeah.
I have to ask, is that still in this version?
It is, but it's been handled very differently.
Okay, I have to hear this.
Okay.
How do you reimagine an orgy scene?
Well, instead of focusing on explicit visuals, they've stylized it.
Okay.
The focus is now on the atmosphere, the decadence, and Caligula's descent into nihilism.
Wow.
They've used clever editing techniques like quick cuts and distorted imagery to create a sense of unease and disorientation rather than outright titillation.
So they're trying to make it more about the psychological impact than the shock value.
Precisely.
Interesting.
It's a bold choice, and it definitely raises questions about whether it's truly possible to separate art from its exploitative origins.
Right.
But you have to give them credit for trying to create something new and thought-provoking out of such controversial material.
I'm sensing a but coming.
Well, the review does point out that despite all these efforts, the film still retains some of its problematic elements.
Okay.
There are scenes of violence and implied incest that might be disturbing to some viewers.
Uh-huh.
The question is, can those elements be contextualized within the larger narrative, or do they ultimately overshadow the film's artistic merits?
All right, so maybe this ultimate cut isn't a complete redemption, but it's definitely a fascinating experiment in how we grapple with difficult art.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so compelling.
So we've got this re-edited film trying to find a balance between a serious exploration of power and the legacy of exploitation cinema.
Right.
It's got captivating performances, stunning visuals, but also some lingering issues.
Yeah.
Where do we go from here?
Well, I think it's time to delve a little deeper into the specific techniques they used to create this ultimate cut.
Okay.
How did they actually go about transforming the film?
Right.
What choices did they make and why?
Let's do it.
Okay.
This Team Dives is just getting started.
All right, so let's get into the nuts and bolts of this ultimate cut. One of the most striking things they did was to completely restructure the opening sequence.
Really? So, the opening sets the tone for the whole film, right?
Absolutely. In the original, it's very much in your face, showcasing Caligula's excesses right from the start.
Right.
This new version takes a completely different approach.
Okay.
It opens with a scene of young Caligula witnessing the death of his father poisoned by his uncle Tiberius.
Interesting. So they're giving us a glimpse into his past, trying to understand the roots of his cruelty.
Exactly. They're setting up a psychological framework for the character, showing how early trauma and a thirst for revenge might have shaped him.
Okay.
It's a much more nuanced approach compared to the original's shock and awe tactics.
Okay, I'm seeing how this reframing is working, but they're not just rearranging scenes, are they?
Right.
The review mentioned something about the music.
Right. The original score, composed by the legendary Ennio Morricone, was actually quite beautiful and complex.
Okay.
But it was often overshadowed by the graphic visuals and the overall tone of the film.
So what did they do? Did they replace the score entirely?
No, they kept Morricone's score.
Okay.
But they re-edited it extensively. They've used it more strategically, highlighting certain themes and motifs to underscore the emotional and psychological undercurrents of the story.
It sounds like they're really trying to create a whole new viewing experience, even for people who've seen the original.
Exactly. They're encouraging us to pay attention to the subtleties, the nuances that might have been lost in the original's more sensationalistic presentation.
Okay, so we've got a restructured opening, a carefully curated score. But what about the dialogue? The review mentioned they restored some of Caligula's monologues.
That's another crucial element of the re-edit. They've brought back some of the more introspective and philosophical passages that were cut from the original.
Oh, wow.
These monologues give us a deeper insight into Caligula's mind, his worldview, his justifications for his actions.
So it's not just about toning down the shock value. It's about giving depth to the character and inviting him to engage with his ideas, even if they're disturbing.
Absolutely. And these monologues are brilliantly delivered by Malcolm McDowell. They showcase his range as an actor, his ability to convey both vulnerability and chilling ruthlessness.
This brings us back to the question of whether a film with such a controversial past can ever truly be redeemed.
Right, and there's no easy answer. Some critics argue that no amount of re-editing can erase the exploitative nature of the original production. Others believe that by focusing on the artistic elements, we can engage with the film on a different level, appreciate its complexities, and perhaps even learn something from it.
I see both sides of the argument. On one hand, you can't ignore the film's history and the way it was made. But on the other hand, if we dismiss every work of art that has a problematic past, we might miss out on some valuable insights and experiences.
It's a delicate balance for sure, and it's something each viewer has to grapple with on their own, but I think the ultimate cut at least offers a starting point for that conversation.
It's definitely making me think about how we approach art in general. Do we separate the work from the artist?
Right.
Or is the context always essential to understanding the work?
Those are the big questions, and I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all answer, but what's so interesting about this Caligula project is that it's forcing us to confront those questions head-on.
It's like a case study in the ethics of art and how our perspectives evolve over time, what might have been considered shocking or exploitative in the past can be viewed differently through a modern lens.
And speaking of modern perspectives, the review mentions that the re-edit has actually sparked a renewed interest in the historical figure of Caligula himself.
Really, how so?
Well, it seems that the film, even in its re-edited form, has prompted some viewers to delve into the historical accounts of his reign.
Okay.
They're comparing the cinematic portrayal with the historical record, trying to separate fact from fiction.
So the film is acting as a gateway to history, even if it takes some liberties with the truth.
Exactly. And that's something that film can do so well. It can spark our curiosity, make us want to learn more about the past, even if it presents a stylized or fictionalized version of events.
That's actually a pretty compelling argument for watching the film, even if you have reservations about its origins.
It definitely adds another layer to the discussion. Caligula. The Ultimate Cut is not just a film, it's a cultural artifact, a conversation starter, and a reminder that history is never truly settled.
Okay, we've talked about the re-editing techniques, the performances, the ethical dilemmas, and the historical context.
Right.
But we haven't really touched on the visuals.
Right.
And the review did mention that the film is visually stunning.
Right, the cinematography is breathtaking. They filmed on location in Italy and used elaborate sets and costumes to recreate the opulence and grandeur of ancient Rome.
It must have been incredibly expensive to make.
It was, and that's another reason why the film's failure was such a blow to everyone involved.
Yeah.
They poured so much time, money, and creative energy into this project, and it ended up being a critical and commercial disaster.
I'm imagining these incredible visuals being juxtaposed with these really intense, disturbing scenes.
Yeah.
It must create a very jarring experience for the viewer.
Absolutely, the contrast is deliberate. It's meant to reflect the duality of Caligula himself, the beauty and the brutality, the allure and the repulsion.
This whole thing is sounding more and more like a modern-day Greek tragedy.
That's a perfect analogy. Caligula's story has all the elements of a classic tragedy: the rise and fall of a powerful figure, hubris, betrayal, and ultimately a descent into madness.
Right.
And like all great tragedies, it leaves us with some profound questions about the nature of humanity, the limits of power, and the consequences of our actions.
Okay, so we've got this visually stunning, ethically challenging, psychologically complex re-edit of a film that was originally intended to be pure spectacle. Where does that leave the average viewer?
Well, I think it comes down to personal taste and tolerance for ambiguity. If you're looking for a lighthearted romp through ancient Rome, this is definitely not the film for you.
Right.
But if you're willing to engage with difficult themes, challenge your own assumptions, and explore the dark side of human nature, then Caligula, The Ultimate Cut, might be a rewarding experience.
It sounds like a film that demands your full attention and maybe even a little soul-searching afterward.
Exactly. It's not just entertainment, it's an experience.
Okay, I'm sold. I'm adding it to my watch list. But before we wrap up, I have to ask you, what was the critical reception of this Ultimate Cut?
Yeah.
I mean, was it hailed as a masterpiece or did it get panned?
Well, the reviews have been mixed, which is kind of what you'd expect with a project like this.
Okay.
Some critics praise the re-edit for its ambition, its technical achievements, and its willingness to engage with difficult subject matter.
So some people really appreciate the attempt to salvage art from the wreckage.
Yes, but there are also critics who argue that it's ultimately a futile exercise. They believe that the film is irredeemable, that no amount of editing can erase its exploitative past.
So it's still a polarizing film, even in this new form.
Absolutely, and that's what makes it so fascinating. It's a film that continues to spark debate, challenge our perceptions, and force us to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves and the art we consume.
I'm really intrigued to see how this whole Caligula saga plays out in the long run. Will this Ultimate Cut become the definitive version of the film, or will it always be overshadowed by the controversy surrounding the original?
Only time will tell, but one thing's for sure, this re-edit has reignited the conversation about the film. And that's a good thing. It's forcing us to reevaluate our relationship with art, to think critically about the stories we tell ourselves, and to grapple with the complexities of history and human nature.
So we've unpacked the editing, the performances, the ethical dilemmas, and the critical reception. But what does it all mean for our listener? Why should they care about this re-edited film from almost 50 years ago?
Well, I think it goes beyond just this one film, Caligula. The Ultimate Cut is a microcosm of a larger cultural phenomenon, the ongoing struggle to reconcile our fascination with the past with our evolving moral sensibilities.
It's like looking in a mirror and seeing both the beauty and the ugliness of our own history reflected back at us.
Exactly. And that's never a comfortable experience, but it's an important one. It forces us to ask ourselves some tough questions.
Like, how do we engage with art that challenges our values? How do we separate the art from the artist, or in this case, the film, from its exploitative origins?
Precisely. And how do we reconcile our fascination with stories of power, corruption, and transgression with our desire for a more just and equitable world?
These are big questions, and Caligula, the ultimate cut, doesn't pretend to have all the answers, but it does offer a platform for discussion, a space to explore these ideas, and to wrestle with our own contradictions.
And ultimately, that's what great art should do. It should provoke, challenge, and inspire us to think more deeply about ourselves and the world around us.
So, dear listener, knowing all of this, does Caligula, the ultimate cut, pique your curiosity? Does it make you want to revisit this controversial piece of cinematic history and form your own opinion?
The choice is yours, but I think this deep dive has shown that even a film as notorious as Caligula can offer valuable insights and spark important conversations.
It's a reminder that art is never truly finished, that our understanding of it evolves over time, and that even the most controversial works can have a lasting impact on our culture and our consciousness. It's like they say history is written by the victors, but this ultimate cut maybe gives a voice back to the artists who are originally trying to tell a different story.
It's certainly an attempt to reclaim the narrative, to shift the focus away from the sensationalism and towards a more nuanced exploration of the themes and characters. But as we've discussed, it's a complex and messy endeavor.
So let's bring this back to our listener. What's the takeaway here? We've got this re-edited film, a controversial history, mixed critical reception. What's the verdict?
Well, there's no easy answer. It's not a simple thumbs up or thumbs down.
I get it. It's not a popcorn flick you just watch and forget about.
Exactly. Caligula, The Ultimate Cut, is a film that demands engagement. It asks you to think critically, to confront your own biases, and to consider multiple perspectives.
It sounds like a film that will stay with you long after the credits roll.
That's the hope, at least. And whether you ultimately love it or hate it, I think it's a film that deserves to be seen and discussed. It's a testament to the enduring power of cinema to provoke, challenge, and captivate.
It's also a reminder that art is rarely created in a vacuum. It's influenced by the social, political, and cultural forces of its time, and our understanding of art can change over time as our values and perspectives evolve.
That's a key takeaway for me. We can't just view art through a modern lens. We have to consider the historical context, the intentions of the artists, and the impact the work has had on culture and society.
So knowing all of this, would you recommend Caligula, The Ultimate Cut, to our listener?
I would recommend approaching it with an open mind and a willingness to engage with its complexities. Don't expect a simple, straightforward narrative. Be prepared to be challenged, disturbed, and maybe even a little bit changed by the experience.
It sounds like a journey worth taking, and who knows, maybe it will even spark a deeper appreciation for the art of filmmaking and the enduring power of stories to transport us to different worlds and different times.
And perhaps even to inspire us to question our own assumptions and to see the world in a new light.
Well said so to our listener. If you're intrigued by what you've heard today, I encourage you to seek out Caligula, The Ultimate Cut. It's available on the Criterion channel and might be playing in select theaters. Dive in and form your own opinion on this fascinating and controversial reimagining.
And if you do watch it, let us know what you think. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this complex and challenging film, because ultimately the most important part of any deep dive is the conversation it sparks.
That's what makes it all worthwhile. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Caligula, The Ultimate Cut. We'll see you next time for another exploration of the fascinating and thought-provoking world of art and culture.